Good evening, everyone. It's a pleasure to be here tonight. I'm here on behalf of Dr. Lloyd Minor, who is our Provost and Senior Vice President for Academic Affairs at Johns Hopkins. One of the many duties that a provost has is to find new leadership, and he is on a search committee. He has a search committee commitment this evening and apologizes for not being here. I'm Sarah Steinberg. I'm the Vice Provost for Student Affairs, and I'd like to welcome all of you here tonight. Tonight's lecture is a special partnership of the Provost's annual lecture series and the Milton S. Eisenhower Symposium. Since Hopkins' inception in 1876, members of our community have pushed the boundaries of human understanding in a number of different fields. And at times, it makes the seemingly impossible a reality. For example, as many of you know, last week we celebrated the Adam Riess's receipt of the Nobel Prize in Physics. So to acknowledge this kind of culture of discovery that we have at Johns Hopkins, the Office of the Provost launched a Provost Project on Innovation to spotlight current Johns Hopkins faculty and staff who are on discovery's front line. The Provost Lecture Series has a theme of innovation, and it recognizes faculty and staff who embrace tackling some of today's most challenging questions. Our speaker tonight, Mayor Cory reflects the qualities that we really hold in high esteem at Johns Hopkins. He's a perfect match. He has a willingness to use the power and potential that we all embody to tackle problems that others might consider unsolvable. He has a commitment to implementing innovative ideas, and he has a dedication to the welfare of others. So his presence tonight is perfect for this co-sponsored lecture series. Tonight's event is second in a lineup of several of impressive speakers that we have had, and we look forward to some additional ones later this fall. But for now, what I would like to do is welcome the three MSE Symposium co-chairs who have made this evening possible. Our students, Elizabeth Goodstein, Jonathan Kornblau, and Jonathan Mest, have done a fabulous job, and I'd like to give them a special thank you for all the arrangements tonight, as well as all the students who have been involved in making the arrangements for tonight and for all the speakers that we have coming this fall. We are very much enriched by their... It's all yours.
Welcome again to the 2011 Milton S. Eisenhower Symposium. Founded in 1967, the symposium is entirely student-run, with the goal of bringing informative and intellectually challenging lectures to the Johns Hopkins and greater Baltimore and Washington, D.C. communities. This year's theme is America's Boundless Possibilities: Innovate, Advance, Transform. Increasing globalization and the advent of social networking have fostered more worldwide competition than ever before. In this new age, America must strive to remain at the forefront of progress. This year's symposium will address the various strides America must take to strengthen its position in the global landscape and catapult the world towards the future. To adequately discuss the challenging issues facing our generation, we will invite a diverse group of prominent speakers to further inform our community.
The Honorable Cory A. Booker took the oath of office as mayor of Newark following a sweeping electoral victory. Elected with a clear mandate for change, Mayor Booker has begun work on realizing a bold vision for the city. Radical transformation of the Newark Police Department has led to Newark setting the nationwide pace for crime reduction. As of July 1st, 2008, Newark led the nation among large cities for reductions in shootings and murders, achieving decreases of more than 40%. Under Mayor Booker's leadership, the city of Newark has committed to a $40 million transformation of the city's parks and playgrounds through a groundbreaking public-private partnership. The Booker administration has also doubled affordable housing production within the last 2 years. Mayor Booker received his BA and MA from Stanford University, a BA in modern history at Oxford University as a Rhodes Scholar, and completed his law degree at Yale University. He has earned a reputation as a leader with innovative ideas and a willingness to take bold actions. Now we'll just show a brief video of some of Mayor Cory Booker's achievements.
I think the future for the city of Newark in economic development, the future for the city of Newark in public safety, and the future of the city of Newark for our children is incredible. This idea that we're brick city, that we're tough, just like bricks, strong, resilient, hard. And when we come together, frankly, there's nothing we can't build in this city. My team is here. You got our help, you got my help, get it done. And just about every movie, it seems like, is about somebody who's trying to keep people safe or fight crime, some superhero. But the reality is, guys, this is real life, and we're trying to do some of the same things that Hollywood is trying to capture. We don't wear capes, we don't have special powers, but we're engaged, in my opinion, in the biggest and most important fight in America.
First of all, how do you think I can help? Because I've got some ideas as well.
And you shopping? The mayor's got to eat. Can I eat?
I think James Baldwin, who's my favorite author, once wrote that children are never good at listening to their elders, but they never fail to imitate them.
Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Cory Booker.
How's everybody doing? This is Parents' Weekend, right? Is there at least one parent in here? A few parents in here. Uh-oh, the parents might be outnumbering the students here. I'm thrilled to be here, and we have about an hour, and I want to talk for about 30 minutes or so, but I really want to get to a dialogue about your thoughts, what's on your mind, and I really have only a few themes I want to talk about, and you would expect that a mayor would get right into policy and sort of the hard stuff. I'm going to leave that to your questions. And first of all, I heard that there was another mayor here about 2 weeks ago, Jerry Springer. It's mayoral theme here. So if anybody wants to go Cory at any point during the time I'm speaking, you can start yelling that out. But really, actually, I've come to realize on my journey that what's most important is where your moral compass stands. And the values that I've learned along the way in leadership have been the ones that have helped me most face problems, no matter what the issue is in particular. And what I'd love to do is just stick with a few themes that I've learned. And one this theme is simple. It's this idea of conspiracy, which I'll hit in a second. Another one is about vision. The second one is about being broken. And then the final one is about bonds. And I want to get through these as quickly as possible so we can get into it in Jerry Springer style. So the first one is just the idea of conspiracy. Look, I'm happy it's Parents' Weekend because I've got two parents who are, like probably many of them in the room, extraordinary people. And we, children, and all of us here are children of someone, I learned in my life that I began to shut my parents out somewhere around the teenage years in terms of their ability to influence me with their stories because I had heard them all before and heard them again and again and again. But what was interesting to me is the older I got, the more I realized that the stories would have sort of different versions to them. And they would get more interesting because the moral would be the same, but the details and the facts would become very creative. And so my father, he would tell me stories about his childhood. And first, he was poor. Then he couldn't afford to be poor. He was just P-O, couldn't afford the other two letters. Then he was in a segregated schoolhouse, and it was a one-room schoolhouse. Then it was a lean-to on the side of a mountain. And he grew up in the mountains of North Carolina, and the weather events, first maybe rainstorms, thunderstorms, but then the weather events now that I got into my 30s and then hit 40, the weather events just seem to be incredible. I cannot understand to this day, Dad, how your mountain town got hit by a tsunami. I just don't understand that in North Carolina. And so he tells this one story that I love. And he tells a story, and again, it's got to be apocryphal, I know, but it's just, I enjoy it. And where he was sitting in the back of his classroom, and a teacher came into the classroom and said, class, I want to teach you all about self-esteem. And forgive me if I'm insulting anybody from the South here or from North Carolina, but my father said that the teacher then said, now anybody in this classroom thinks you're stupid or thinks you're dumb, I want you to stand up right now. And my father said everybody in the class sort of looked at her and she goes, what is she talking about? She goes, come on now, if you think you're dumb, you think you're stupid, stand up so we can talk about this. And so my father said after nobody moving there and seeing her waiting there, standing impatiently, looking at the class kids, my father said he finally just pushed his chair back and stood up proudly. And the woman said, my father said the teacher looked at him and said, Mr. Booker Boy, what's wrong with you? You think you're dumb? You think you're stupid? And my father said he just scratched his head and said, well, shucks, ma'am, I don't think I'm stupid, but I didn't want you to be the only one standing. Now, my father takes this joke and this story in a very specific direction. You see, he has this belief that we are all here in ways that we can't even imagine. We are all here as the result of a grand conspiracy of love. That all of us in our DNA have come about to this very moment in time because people whose names you will never know, who you'll never even be able to enumerate, did small acts of kindness and decency and love that you can't imagine to get us to where we are in this point in history. And he says it's such an improbable story. He tells me always about the historical facts. Boy, people whose names you did not know for you stormed beaches in Normandy, stood on Midway. People whose names you don't know fought against slavery. Blacks and whites along the Underground Railroad. Stories about the Civil Rights Movement. And then they would tell me the stories from their lives. They'd say, son, you don't understand that when I was growing up, my mom was born to a single mother, couldn't take care of me. And it was people in a town in North Carolina who all pitched in, and eventually I was taken in by a family. Son, you won't know that all these folks who looked after me, who even though I wasn't their own child, took an interest in my life. In fact, when I was time to go to college, my dad would tell me he couldn't afford it, so he's going to work for a while, which people realized that he might never end up going to college if that was the case. So he said, I left the mountains of North Carolina to go down to North Carolina Central in Durham with envelopes full of $1 bills and $5 bills of people who put money together in that town, people who you'll never know gave me that opportunity. He talks about the Civil Rights Movement and introduced me to some folks, but tells me stories. It started in 1961 in North Carolina, the sit-in movement. And he says, there are people who don't know who sat in, got kicked and spit on. He said when he got to Washington, D.C. for his first jobs, it was the Urban League and people, blacks and whites, coming together to have my father be the first African-American hired by an oil company, by a department store. And then soon, thanks to activism of many, my mom and dad became two of the first blacks hired by IBM. When we moved up to New Jersey, to the town I grew up in, an organization called the Fair Housing Council, blacks and whites, whose names I don't know, worked together to have my family be the first black family to move into this town. In fact, they got a white couple that opposes them in 1969. Their names were Mr. and Mrs. Brown, but they were not brown. They were white. That after my parents were told the house was sold, they went as a test couple to prove that the house was still for sale. On the day of the closing, my father showed up with a young lawyer, whose name I do not know, to press the violations. And then I grew up, as my father said, 4 raisins and a tub of vanilla ice cream, he used to call our family, growing up in this town of privilege. And the way my father would put it, he said, son, you don't understand. You drink deeply from wells of freedom and liberty and opportunity that you did not dig. You eat lavishly from banquet tables prepared for you by the hands of ancestors that you cannot name. You have a choice in life. You can grow drunk on the wine of other people's sacrifice and struggle, or you could live every day conscious and grateful for all this conspiracy of love, for all this conspiracy of history. You can have it metabolized in your body to make you continue in that legacy of love. This is what my parents wanted me to understand that no matter what the challenge, understand that the history of this country is a screaming testimony to the achievement of the impossible. We are a nation where impossible dreams, improbable dreams came true. In fact, my grandfather used to always tell me, son, you're experiencing a reality that was even dangerous for us to dream of when I was growing up. And so this idea of conspiracy motivates me today more than you can imagine, knowing all the things that had to happen to produce this moment we're experiencing right now. And to me, this is an understanding that should infuse and infect your vision of the reality we experience today. And so this is what I mean by vision. I'm a person that believes that you have a choice to make when you open your eyes, and that the facts before you are important, but they are not the most important thing about determining what happens in the future. Look, I was a young student trying to figure out what I was going to do with my life, having my mom ask me that question all the time, which was very difficult. But my mom, to her credit, used to always say to me, son, I want you to live a fearless life. I want you to stop and imagine and dream. If I could not fail, what would I be doing with my life? I want you to unleash your greatest ambitions and pursue them with a fearsome loyalty. And if you fail, if you fall, understand that in that pit, you will find some of your greatest lessons. Don't shrink from the world, my parents would tell me. Understand that you were not born to fit in, you were born to stand out. All of us. And so I, with that kind of encouragement, decided to dream big. And I decided that I was going to try to start a nonprofit. I was going to be entrepreneurial coming out of school. There was this guy who had this program in Harlem that I loved called the Reedland Center. Now, as many of you might know it, called the Harlem Children's Zone. And I said, I'm going to go back to Jersey, where I'm from, and I'm going to start this great program in Newark, the city that I love. And I decided that I would answer the call of that great American prophet, Chris Rock, who said, why is it the most dangerous street or most violent street in every city is often named for the man who stood for nonviolence? And I moved onto a section of Martin Luther King Boulevard in Newark. Now, Martin Luther King Boulevard has these towering testimonies to humanity in Newark. It's got great higher learning institutions or county college, lots of great areas, but the section that I moved into was a lot of challenges. And I moved in there when I was still a law student, full of this ambition and this idealism. But when I moved onto the street, I was confronted by, and I had worked everywhere from East Harlem to East Palo Alto, California. And I moved into this section, and I had never seen the challenges that seemed to pierce my eyes. I saw violence and drug abuse and a lot of things that just sort of struck me. Heard gunshots, and I thought to myself, oh, this is going to be so challenging. And it really felt some trepidation. And a friend of mine said to me that if you're going to organize in this area, I was still a law student, still trying to meet people, you got to meet the woman. I moved into a room in a boarding house on the street, but across the street were these two big high-rises, and they said, you've got to meet the woman who was a tenant president. She's a legend in that neighborhood. You've got to go see her. And I'm thinking to myself, all right, well, I'm Cory Booker. I'm going to go and help this young lady. And so I walked up to her apartment door like I was John Wayne, and she knocked on the door. She opened the door. I'm like, hello, little Philly. And I said to her, I'm Cory Booker. I'm from Yale Law School, ma'am. I'm living in the neighborhood. Shucks. And I said to her that I'm here to help you. And she looked at me, this incredibly wise woman. She looks at me. She's about 5 feet and a smidgen. And she looks at me and she says, you want to help me? And I said, yes, ma'am, I want to help you. And she said, okay, if you want to help me, come with me. And she closes the door behind her, grabs me by the arm, and says, you need to follow me. And so I followed her down 5 flights of stairs. She leads me through the courtyard, leads me into Martin Luther King Boulevard, and we're standing there. And she looks at me and she goes, tell me what you see around you. Cars going this way and that way. What do you see around you? And I go, what are you talking about? She goes, describe what you see. And so I said, oh, okay, I see high-rises, graffiti, abandoned building. I just described the neighborhood. And the more I talked, the more she just looked disappointed, dejected, even frustrated. Finally, she just said, no, I'm sorry. You can't help me. I'm like, what do you mean? She goes, you can't help me. She started walking to the side of the road, and I ran after her. I stopped her, and I said, ma'am, I don't understand. What are you talking about? And she looked at me hard, and she said, son, you need to understand something, that the world you see outside of you will always be a reflection of what you have inside of you. If you only see problems and darkness and despair, that's all there's ever going to be. But if you're one of those people who, no matter when you open your eyes, you stubbornly see hope and opportunity, you see possibility, you see love, you see the face of God, then you could be someone who helps me. And she walks off, leaving me there standing. And I remember looking down at my feet, thinking to myself, okay, grasshopper, thus endeth the lesson. This was my start in Newark. A woman reminding me that, yes, understand where you've come from. Yes, let that understanding of all of that love fuel a fearlessness in your heart. But you always have to have a vision that is larger than the reality around you. We have so many people, especially at this point in American history, that are surrendering to cynicism, that have a toxic sense of resignation. They're resigning themselves that the problems are always going to be there, that there'll always be poverty, there'll always be schools that don't work, neighborhoods you shouldn't go to. That's crazy. We can't resign ourselves. We can't surrender to cynicism. There has to be within our spirit and our heart a vision that is larger than what we see in the physical world. Look, when I was a college freshman, I finished my year, and then I worked that summer in a inner city called East Palo Alto in California, and I was working with kids in after school, and there's an old saying that says, good speakers borrow, great speakers steal. And I was asked to give a speech at the end of the summer, long hot day. I'm 19 years old, and they're saying, we want you to give the sort of the closing up moment. Now, I relied on another speaker that I heard when I was a high school football player, who was this guy who came in and had us all sitting down. He says, okay, everybody's sitting there. Do me a favor, raise your hands as high as you can. And we all raised our hands. And he said, okay, I want you to raise your hands as high as you can. And we're all football players, and we're squeezing it out. We're like, yeah, we got it as high as you can. He goes, okay, you got it? And we're like, we got it. He goes, now go 3 inches higher. And we all realized, wait a minute, some of us stood up, we could always go 3 inches higher. And then he gave us that lesson, you could always do 3 inches more, and that was our slogan. We were like, 3 inches, roar. And so here I am, now I'm a college student, and I'm 19, and I've got to give a speech, so I steal this guy's story, and I decided to do this with the kids. Now, these were kids that were ages 6 to 12, and it was the end of a long day. It was hot. Everybody wanted to go home, but I was trying to rev them up. So I said, okay, guys, get together. And they're like, okay. I want everybody to raise your hands as high as you can. And they're like, no. One guy raises his hands, man, put your hand down, man. Brother's got BO. You smell. And so I decided to resort to a base form of persuasion, often associated with my profession, called bribery. And I reached into my hand, and I pulled out a $5 bill, and I said, $5 to the kid that can raise his hand the highest. And I'm telling you, within all of us, there is this capitalistic instinct that as soon as you wave money, motivates us. All these kids' hands shot up, and I now stand back in a sense of smug satisfaction, looking at them. And I'm thinking to myself, this is fantastic. And then I saw over to the left this young man who was so much like my dad. He was born poor. He was born to a single mother. He was born in a segregated environment. He had a tough home life, and I did not want to squelch his view. He's no way. He was the shortest kid of them all. He's looking at these other kids, all raising their hand. His arms are crossed, his face is in a pout. And I'm about to walk over to him and say, there, don't worry about it. You can't compete. This is just an exercise. And suddenly he turns around and starts running out the door. And I'm like, oh, what did I do? His little legs are carrying him out of the gym. So I run after him. I catch him in 3 strides. And I pick the little guy up, and he's wiggling underneath me. I turn him around, and I say, Robert, what's wrong? And he looks at me and says, let me go. And I said, why? And he said, you said you'd give $5 to the kid who could raise his hand the highest, right? And I said, yeah. And he looks over at the other kids still straining against one another, looks back at me, and with a wisdom that betrayed his age, he said, well, let me go because I know a way to get to the roof. I gave him the $5. And so what I found as mayor of the city of Newark is that my managers, my leaders, community activists, there really are two types of people. Those who yield to circumstance, those who surrender to the prevailing paradigm, or those that want to always think, tinker, imagine, dream of a different way of going, that refuse to relent to what is, refuse to yield to that is what's before them. It is these kind of people who are a little insane because they see things consistently that aren't there. But this is how the breakthroughs happen. Now, the challenge that I see is that this is not just a sometimes thing. I've learned in my life that no change that's sustained and impactful is made in a moment. There's no great speech, one election, one great movement that makes transformative change. Real change is about ordinary Americans getting up every single day and doing acts of kindness, decency, and love, small acts that with vision and consistency add up to transformative change. And the challenge that I found as a guy who is a mayor of an amazing city is that the challenge is consistency of action, consistency of spirit, consistency of vision. You see, I've come to learn that the challenge of life is telling the world your truth, giving testimony to what you believe in, not with words, but with how you conduct yourself. Every moment that we have offers us an amazing opportunity to manifest our truth, to tell the world who we are. And most of us miss these opportunities because we get so consumed with ourselves or our drama or what's going on. I want to make this point again with going back to my college days. I'm standing on this campus and I keep reflecting on the days when I was a Stanford football player and I was chiseled. Picture that, if you will. Now I just jiggle, but back then, I was chiseled. Anybody here is from New Jersey? I was the first situation. Okay. You guys are supposed to be studying, not watching bad TV. The fact that you laughed at that, I'm really worried. So here I was flying from Newark Airport, back from Thanksgiving break, back to California, and I was on a plane that was just out of control. It was, when you're 6'3" and you're chiseled and you're a football player, please keep imagining that. Being in coach and having people put your knees against your chest by putting their seat backs back, it's just a horrible experience. I'm dreading it. Everybody seems to be just dreading it, fighting over carry-on space. It's awful. We all sit down, and then suddenly I look around and I realize the door to the plane closed. Every seat is taken except for the two next to me. And I realized at that moment that God loves me more than everybody else on the plane. I'm obviously his chosen child. Okay. And so at this point, I stretch out. I move my stuff over. My legs are now stretched to the left. I'm just loving this. And then all of a sudden, the plane to the door opens, and I'm serious. I'm like, somebody call the police because the screams coming outside the plane. Somebody must have been murdered out there. Was dying until we all saw on the plane this woman walk in with a baby. And a little boy. And everybody on that plane stops and looks at her. And then their heads move slowly around and look at me. And I could read everybody's mind. They were all saying in a chorus, "You smug bastard. It serves you right." And so this woman comes over and she looks at me and she says, "I'm sitting there." And I'm like, "No." And so I get up and she sits down. Now, look, in life, I'm telling you right now, every moment of your life, every hour, every minute, every second, you have one choice to make. One choice. It's either to accept conditions as they are or take responsibility for changing them. Very simple. Every moment, every person we encounter, every situation we see, we have a choice. So many of us Americans, we're getting caught up in this state I call sedentary agitation, where we sit back at night and watch Fox or MSNBC, whatever your flavor is, and we get so upset about the world going on. But we fail to take responsibility or to get up and do something. We allow our inability to do everything to undermine our determination to do something. And so here, when this person gets us on this plane, as I was so upset, and then I realized, wait a minute, I have the power of choice. In a much more profound, poignant, painful circumstance, a man named Viktor Frankl wrote this great book called Man's Search for Meaning. And he says, and I paraphrase it, you could strip everything away from a person. I realized when you were in concentration camps. And I saw and witnessed people sharing their only piece of bread or comforting others. It shows a testimony to the greatest of all human freedoms, that you can strip everything away from a person except for their ability to choose their attitude in any given set of circumstances. And so here I was on this plane, and I thought to myself, I'm going to make this either the worst flight of my life or I can make this the best. And I said, I'm going to make this the best flight. And suddenly I just summoned some attitude, and I turned around, and I smiled at her. She suddenly, as soon as I got myself out of my own drama and saw her, I realized, wait a minute, this is a painfully embarrassing moment for her. Everybody's looking at her, shooting her daggers with their eyes, and I just started talking to her. Now, we all experience this, especially in college campuses. You guys know what the drill is. If you bump into a friend, how you doing? And as soon as they say, oh, I'm so stressed, I've got a paper and a take-home midterm, you're like, what? I got 2 papers, 3 take-home midterms. Yeah, but I only slept 4 hours last night. 4 hours? The sloth. I've got 2 hours over 2 days. It becomes a competition because we're so caught up in ourselves. So as soon as I started realizing what this woman was going through, I shifted gears. I started making crazy, stupid faces at the baby. By the time we took off, I got her talking to ignore other people. The baby finally started crying. And I said, they're going to have fun. So she's taking care of her child. I said, let me play games with your boy. We were playing tic-tac-toe and hangman. And then I unleashed on him my best jokes appropriate for a 7-year-old. Like, why did Piglet and Tigger and Youre have their heads in the toilet? Because they were looking for poo. I was killing at 35,000 feet. The people around us were trying to jump out of the plane. I got 2 lawsuits for intentional infliction of emotional distress, but we were having fun in my row. The plane lands. It was the quickest flight I ever took. And the amazing thing was we exchanged addresses and we said we'd keep in touch. We did not keep in touch. 5 years passed, 10 years passed, 15 years passed. And now I'm in Newark, New Jersey, involved in what one documentary called a street fight. Did anybody see the street fight movie? Some people said the street fight movie. It's basically this movie about my 2002 election for mayor that was captured all the thuggery, the violence. They had to call in federal election observers. It won the Tribeca Film Festival. It won the Canadian Film Festival. And then it lost in the Academy Awards to a dumb film named March of the Damn Penguins. I hate those flightless rodents. Why do they keep making movies about them? Happy Feet, whatever. Give me a break. I'm a vegetarian, but I make an exception now for penguins. They taste just like chicken. Anyway, I'm getting killed in this. You see it in the movie. I'm getting killed. On one of my lowest days, I get a letter in the mail from somebody that says, you may not remember me, but 15 years ago, I met you on a plane. And I'll never forget your kindness. It was the first time I flew with my kids. I thought it was going to be a nightmare. But it turned out to be an amazing experience. And she went on to talk about that flight, and then she said to me something that surprised me. My family owns a factory in Newark. And I've been able to talk to our employees, most of them who are Newark residents, and I've been able to tell them all about your character, but I would love for you to come in and talk to them. And more than that, they ended up becoming campaign contributors. They ended up becoming volunteers. In fact, the young boy who was tortured by those jokes ended up being one of our best volunteers, because now, 15 years later, he was a great young man. And so to me, this is the understanding of life. I still remember the exact place I was where my grandfather died. I was on 18th Avenue in Newark. And I remember weeping on the side of a road in a car when I heard the news, but I held on to something that a scientist once told me about stars in the sky, that many of them, they're so far away, it takes light so far to travel, the stars themselves might have gone out, but the light that they give off will go on forever. We're just like that. Every moment we have a choice to make, to dull and dim who we are or to be brilliant, to tell the truth of who we are, to light up the world. But so many of us play small. This world needs light right now. It needs energy. It needs you. It hungers for the truth of who you are, your uniqueness, your divinity. And so in a city like Baltimore or Newark or Chicago, where the American dream is in this cauldron of challenges as well as possibilities, all of us who stand here, who benefit from conspiracies of love, we have a choice to be a conspirator or to surrender. And so what I'm here to tell you is it's not easy. This idea of being broken, which was the next theme I wanted to tell you, it's just not easy. I cannot tell you how many times that this world has made me feel that the definition of courage is not some big fight. It's just being able to get out of bed in the morning and put your feet on the ground and listen and hear your heart beat, thumping to the world, I'm here, I'm here, I'm here. Just to get the energy to get out of your door and go back into life. It's brutal sometimes, and the challenges that we all face, it makes me love humanity even more because every person I meet, I know they're in the struggle too. But for me, those times of being broken, those are the times that you have a chance to learn your greatest lessons, but more importantly, to define your spirit. Look, I was, again, this ambitious guy running for office. In my second election, no street fight, no penguins. I'm running for office, but in the months before that, now I'm living in Brick Towers with Miss Jones. And I started coming home, and these kids that I'd watched grow up, now they're like high school students. They're starting to show some colors and gangs. I come home sometimes. They used to hang out in the lobby. Great kids, great spirit. One of them reminded me so much of my dad, a quick sense of humor. And I started coming home, and I would bring them things because I knew they'd be hanging out. So I'd bring them food from where I went to eat or talking to them. Sometimes I started smelling some substances that were smoked in college that I heard a lot of people smoked at Stanford. I knew nothing about that. And so we'll talk later. And so I said I got to do more, and I started taking them out to dinner and to movies and really trying to do some intervention. But then I got so important. I got so busy. I was now running for mayor. And then when I got elected mayor, I immediately started getting death threats. And so the FBI and others wanted me to have security around me. So before I was mayor and had city police, they were assigning state police and others. And these guys carry big guns. And so now I was coming home to the lobby late at night with guys with big guns. And guess what? Those kids weren't hanging out anymore in the lobby. And so I lost touch with them. But when I got elected, I had big, important things to do. I was mayor of the city now, focusing on the big things. And crime and violence was such an issue in 2006. And once I got sworn in, I immediately went into action. Every shooting in the city, I was rushing to the street corners. I was talking to residents. I was saying, believe this is not who we are. See our city for what it will be. We will get there. And I was basically pastoring as well as mayoring. And then one night, weeks after I got elected, I come to one shooting scene, and I see a body covered up, another one being put in the ambulance, and I'm barely even paying attention because I'm getting to my residents, talking to them. I go home that night, and the next morning I wake up, and I look in the newspaper, and I see the name of the kid that was murdered. It was a young man that reminded me of my father. I remember how upset I felt when the day of the funeral came. I stood in the back of that funeral and just felt numbness come over my body. Everybody was there packing that house. I saw teachers, community leaders, fellow students, activists from the community, everybody coming out for this funeral. I stood there as long as I could take it. I knew people were looking at me as the mayor, but something was not right in my heart. I left and went back to City Hall, walked into my new office, this office that is historic with names that resonate back 100 years from our city. I closed the door and I locked it and I sat on my couch and I started crying. I said, God had put this boy in front of me every day. And look, all of us could show up for his funeral. But where were we for his life? You see, I've come to realize that we have to understand that in this world it is harsh, it is hard. There are times when you're going to feel like not going on, but if you can muster the will and the focus, you can keep going. I tell a story that when I came out of Brick Towers on a day that I had witnessed a murder where literally a person died in my arms. And I was shaken and just angry. I was angry at the world. How could this world know? Everybody knows whose name is John Benet Ramsey or Natalie Holloway. We have perverse obsessions with the death of some of our children, but nobody can name one black boy that was murdered in my city last year. And I remember just being full of just a darkness covering my heart. And I bumped into Miss Jones on the way out. And I didn't even have to say a word to her, but as soon as I looked at this woman, an octogenarian, I suddenly felt my attitude shift. And it shifted because when I was writing a story once for Esquire, I was writing it about her. And she had told me a story that I often leaned on in that moment where she was in her apartment in the 80s. Her son, who served in the United States military, one of our soldiers, came home to visit her. And she got a knock on her door, opening the door, but it wasn't her son. It was another woman who was crying and could not speak. And she dragged Miss Jones down to the lobby, and Miss Jones said, and again, I had never heard this story before. I'm writing for Esquire. I feel like a reporter here and getting ready to write my story about her, my hero, and she's telling me the story I never heard before. She gets to the lobby, she tells me, and in the lobby, on the floor, laying on his back, is her son with bullet holes in his chest, bleeding the lobby floor red. She said she fell to her knees and wailed into the universe, she said, like she never cried before. She finishes his story, and I look at her, and I put my pen down, and you don't know what to say. You just hear a mother talking about the murder of her child. And I said the stupidest thing that came to my mind. I said, Miss Jones, I don't understand. I know where you work. Miss Jones and I both paid market rent to live in these buildings that would become public housing. And I said, why do you still stay here? Why do you still live in these buildings? And she looked at me, almost insulted by the question. She goes, why do I still live here? And I go, yes, Miss Jones, why do you still live here? And she goes, why am I still in Brick Towers? And I said, yes. She goes, why am I still the tenant president since these buildings were built in 1969? And I think to myself, that's electoral longevity, but yeah, I want to know why. And she crosses her arms and she looks at me and she says, because I'm in charge of Homeland Security. What I see in Newark day after day are heroes. People that, despite the challenges, despite the personal affronts, they still are able to tell their truth. That even in their broken moments, they find a way to heal even stronger. In the heat and the fire of pain, they forge stronger metal. That when things that often light up the universe, they have to endure burning. That they live life with this courage that says, I'm not going to sit back in a state of sedentary agitation. In fact, I'd rather have my ship sunk at sea than rot in the harbor. That I am on a voyage, and every day that passes, I want to continue to discover the world that I see in my dreams. And in Newark, the greatest breakthroughs that we're having as a city are when people come together with that spirit. I've seen problems that other people talk about and complain about, and innovators and venture philanthropists and social entrepreneurs and government actors join together, screw parties, left and right, working together to do ingenious things in Newark. I remember when I was beginning to be frustrated because every shooting scene I would go to, this is remarkable, and it's true probably for most cities, we did a study and found out that the victims of shootings themselves have been arrested, 83% of them have been arrested before, and they've been arrested at rates of an average of 10 times. That we started saying there's something wrong with this paradigm that's not serving anyone in America. It's driving up costs of government because we spend billions of dollars warehousing people in correctional systems that don't correct. people come out and then are going back into prison at rates of 65%. And so we could just say, you know what? Well, that means we need to work harder, keep running even more cops on the streets, more people locked up. But we said there's got to be a different way to go about this. And so we brought people together, innovators, people who imagined something different, people who wanted to exalt human potential, and we started finding great solutions. We brought right people on this political aisle together, like the Manhattan Institute. We brought people on the left, community activists that couldn't even say the word Republican without retching, and sat them down and said, this is America. We've got to think of something different. So we started finding innovations. We realized guys were coming out of prison without any hope in their hearts. They try to get a job, nobody hires them. They try to get identification. They couldn't even get identification. Driver's licenses suspended. Child support payments up in thousands and thousands of dollars. All these barriers they hit. And we started saying, well, let's find ways to liberate that potential of these individuals. Call it their economic potential, their earning potential, call it their spiritual potential. Let's us use our moral imagination. What are real solutions? So we formed something with our law firms. We called all the law firms together and said, look, I know the people most likely to get shot or shoot people in the city, and that's people coming home from prison. Let's lower crime by helping them get better pathways. And we started the nation's first ever pro bono legal services for ex-offenders and are having incredible success. We started talking to guys about what's their greatest motivation, and I found out that their greatest motivation is something my mom has been talking to me about incessantly. Their greatest motivation is fatherhood. They're parents, and they don't want to repeat the mistakes. And so we said, well, let's form a fatherhood center for these guys. Let's give them mentor dads, because we've all learned our best lessons from the examples around us. Let's give them parenting classes. Let's give them partnerships with corporations and businesses. Let's bring the wives or the mothers of their children in to talk with them, to figure out payments. It was an incredible coalition. We actually said we're going to call it a fraternity of men committed to being great dads. We called it Delta Alpha Delta Sigma, dads. And we've now run the program about 4 years. We took a 65% recidivism rate, and we now have it at below 3%. What I'm saying now is we've replicated successes all over our city. We now say we have a city with islands of excellence everywhere. Our challenge, of course, is bringing them to become hemispheres of hope. But this is what I now know. There's nothing we can't do. If you guys in our question and answer bring up problems, I bet you there's somebody somewhere from Baltimore to Boston, from Newark to Oakland, that's doing something incredible that shows us that the real problem today is not a matter of can we deal with America's problems, it's do we have the collective will. And that's where I want to end, that last theme of the idea of coming together, of bonding ourselves with another. It's a story of America, of people from diverse backgrounds bonding themselves together for something bigger and greater than who they were. If you think our nation started with a Declaration of Independence, understand this, that the true testimony of our country throughout its history is a declaration of interdependence. This belief that when we come together with vision, with a determination to work through those broken moments, if we stay together consistently, if we give more, love more, dream more, unleash our moral imagination, there's nothing this country can't do. And I believe that in my heart. My greatest moment in politics followed my worst moment in politics. And that's why I always think that these frustrations and points where you feel really broken, those always are the most valuable moments in your life. Because frustration in and of itself is a precondition to breakthrough, to success. If you don't have what it takes to work through those frustrations, you'll never experience the greatness of a breakthrough. And so here I was in 1998, elected to city council. I had this big upset. The youngest person in the history of my city at that point elected to a city council seat. I go down to city council, and I realize that government is not going to move just because I'm a charming guy. and that somebody designed government in America where in legislative bodies you need a majority to get things done. I mean, who thought of that? And then I had a mayor that was determined. He saw me as a future adversary, so he decided to make my life miserable in all kinds of creative ways. And by the way, in Brick City, we called Newark Brick City, we play hard. And so before you knew it, my phones were tapped by the municipal police. It was just a mistake, Cory. It was an accident, a healthy accident. My car was being ticketed everywhere I parked in the city. And even when I parked in front of City Hall, they were giving me tickets with other council people. And so I was frustrated that I was getting nothing done. I was frustrated that I felt like I made a mistake. Why did I get involved in politics? I was a lawyer, a crusader, a nonprofit guy. Why did I even go into this job? And I was ready to give up. And it hit its worst element on the year after I'd been in office. Got elected and sworn in on July 1st. It was August of 1999. And I was done. I get this call from this great tenant leader, a woman of profound dignity named Elaine Sewell, who was a tenant leader of these high-rises in the northern part of my district. And she was so upset. She was angry. She goes, you got to get the police out here. The violence has gotten crazy. The security company quit. And I'm like, no, I can't. And she's like, what do you mean you can't? I said, you don't understand. I don't control the police. I can't get them to stop ticketing my car, for crying out loud. And she started yelling at me. I started telling her I was impotent. I'm impotent. I can't do anything. She goes, you better do something. I can't do anything. And we hung up the phone on each other, and I stormed home. And I'm walking. Now I'm living in Brick Towers, and I'm storming home. And of course, to my dismay, I see Miss Jones standing in front of my buildings. And I'm thinking to myself, if I just take this angle, maybe she won't see me. And I take the angle, and next thing I know, I say, boy, don't you walk past me. I'm like, Miss Jones, I don't have time. It's been a terrible, you better come here and give Miss Jones a hug. I walk over, and I'm hug, okay. She goes, now tell me what's wrong. And I unleash on her, angry, bitter. What am I doing? I'm going to quit. This makes no sense. I could do more as a lawyer in the community. And then I tell her about Miss Sewell and her problems. And I just told her, I'm so fed up. I don't know what to do to help her. And she looks at me almost as if she got struck by lightning from God. She looks at me and she goes, wait a minute. I'm like, what? She goes, I know what you should do. And I said, wow, what should I do? And she puts her hands on her hips. She goes, yep, I know exactly what you should do. I'm like, okay, tell me. She says, okay, I know what you should do. And I'm like, Miss Jones, I don't have time to play. Just tell me, what should I do? And she crosses her arms and she looks at me proudly and about to impart the wisdom from God. And she says to me, you should do something. That's it? Yes, that's it. Do something. And I was so angry, I wheeled around and I stormed towards my building. And by the way, I'm a man of great faith, and I believe that God has dominion on the world, except for one place. The devil does control public housing elevators. Anybody here knows it? Some people are already going, yeah, that's right, Cory, that's right. Yes, public housing's elevators are controlled by the devil. He has dominion there. And my elevators in my building, they knew when I was in a good mood, they let me ride up. Unless I had to go to the bathroom, then they would get stuck. If I was carrying groceries, they didn't work. Or if I was in a bad mood, so I hike up 16 flights, I go into my apartment. Now, I love religion. I think that all religions have beauty and wisdom and truth. I've studied Vedanta and Hinduism in India. I'm the only, and I challenge anybody to ever correct me on this, I am the only in the history of humanity, the only goy black head of a Chabad house ever. I led a Chabad in England. It's a long story, but in my office, I've got the Bhagavad Gita, the Quran, the Tanakh, the Bible. People come in and say, oh gosh, if the end of days comes, Cory, one of these things is going to work for you. Maybe this one, maybe this one. And so I sit down in my apartment. I'm upset. I turn open to the Bible that was next to my room, and I see this line from the Bible. Right when I opened it, it said, if you have faith the size of mustard seeds, you can. You guys are some needing to go to church or synagogue or mosque. And even those of you guys that knew it, you're like, move mountains. If this was a black church in my city, everybody would be standing up, move mountains! Somebody would light a candle, you know. the passage underneath there says, sometimes, though, you need to fast and pray. And so I suddenly get this point of inspiration. I call up my friend and say, let's get a tent. We got a tent. We built a tent out in front of these projects where Miss Sewell was. And I walked over to Miss Sewell, and I said, Lane, I'm so sorry. I raised my voice. I disrespected you. I said, there's no reason for that. And she said to me, okay. And I hugged her, and we hugged and held each other. I go, look, I don't know what we're going to do about this problem, but I've decided we're going to do something. And I said, would you do me a favor? Would you pray with me every morning? And I'm going to go on a hunger strike. I'm not going to eat any solid food. I'm going to fast. And she's like, all right. And then I do what politicians, I was young in my career, but politicians are really good at. I called a press conference. And I said to the press, I said, this is the United States of America. I said, how can we have people that live in fear in any of our communities, that live in terror, that don't even feel comfortable letting their kids go out at night to go to the local store? I said, we should be better than this. You ignore communities like this, I said to the press. Unless somebody gets shot, then you line up here just to capture the blood on the pavement. I said, interview the people that live here. I dare you to put a minute of their truth on the news. And they did. I went to bed that night, woke up the next morning, 4 or 5 of us prayed, and before I knew it, because of the news in the New York City region, folks just started coming out. First, it was a local black minister who works with our ex-offender reentry programs now. He and I bonded over this. Then community activists started coming out. Then a mayor from a more affluent town in New Jersey saw what was happening. He drove down with his police officers and said, I'm standing with you out here. Correctional officers from a local facility came out and said, we're standing with you out here. Before you knew it, hundreds of people were coming out. We had hospitals coming out to do health screenings for people. We had companies like UPS setting up tables and actually hiring people in the community. We had gospel groups. It was unbelievable. Every day that passed by, more people came out. We had late-night meetings with the drug dealers and had conversations out of love with them about what was going on. We set up mentoring relationships. Before you knew it, we had people in New York City coming out. We had some guy on Wall Street saw what was happening, sent all these pizzas out to feed everybody, which really ticked me off because I was on a hunger strike. On the 10th day, the mayor comes out with all his department heads. Really, it was this moment where here's my adversary, but he had prepared remarks, but I just walked over and we hugged. We just held on to each other. And before you knew it, he let go of me, puts away his prepared remarks, and just says, this is over. I'm going to bring police out here. We're going to keep this safe. And on top of that, he said, we're going to do more. We're going to build parks in this neighborhood because none of the kids have places to go. And we celebrated, and we tore down the tent. But that's not the intent of the story. Remember what I told you? Change does not happen from one event, even 10 days of a hunger strike. It happens because good people wake up every day and do acts of kindness, decency, and love on a consistent basis. Because, look, the mayor said he would do those things. He didn't. The parks were never built. The police stayed for a while. But as soon as they left, some people here know what happens. The drugs and the problems came right back. I don't tell the story for this reason either. It's just little me talking. I'm mayor now. I built the parks. And we've gotten a great operation to create safety in the neighborhood. But the reason why I tell the story, and this is how I end, is because of this idea of bonding with other people. It was this moment where we had a prayer. And there was not just 4 or 5 of us. Now there were hundreds of people standing there holding hands. And there were believers and non-believers. That's not important. There were blacks and whites and Christians and Muslims and Jews and Latinos. It was when I held hands with these people at a young age in my 20s, I looked around and it was the most beautiful scene of America that I ever saw. All these folks holding hands underneath a highway in front of these high-rise projects, and we all started saying things. We had imams and rabbis and priests and ministers praying in the words that they knew. There's Arabic and Hebrew and Spanish and English. But I'm telling you, as I held those hands, I felt stronger than I ever felt in my life. I hadn't eaten for 10 days, but I felt coursing through me a spirit so much larger than myself. And I began, in my moral imagination, to hear those words that bond us all. The old African saying that says, spider webs united could tie up a lion. The saying of a great Israeli leader who once said, Jews together are strong, but Jews with other people are invincible. That one pillar of Islam, that word tawheed, which means we all share a common spirit, a common soul. We are bonded at that level. I heard the words of a black minister in a jail cell in Birmingham in 1963, where he wrote, "We are all caught in an inescapable network of mutuality, tied in a common garment of destiny." And then I heard these three words from a dead language, Latin utterances, that are the hallmark of a young nation still yearning to make itself true, e pluribus unum. And so we can talk in America about our problems. We can talk about the complications and the challenges, but we have no right ever to believe we can't do it, conquer it, overcome it, change it. It is not a matter of can we, it's a matter of do we have the will we make the choice? A mayor of a major city that people told me would ground down my hope, but I'm here to tell you I am hope unhinged. And what I want to see from my community, and I get a chance to witness it every day, what I want to see from my state and from my nation is the challenge and the courage to be America again. And this brings you back to my parents and the poetry they read me as a child. As going to bed, they would pull from so many great authors and American poets, and this was my favorite. "Oh, let America be America again. The land that never has been yet, but yet must be. The land where everyone is free. The poor man, the Indian, the Negro, me. Who made America? Whose sweat and blood, whose faith and pain, whose hand at the foundry, whose plow in the rain, must make our mighty dream live again. Oh yes, I say it plain. America never was America to me. But I swear this oath, America will be." Thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you. I've talked a little long. I know we have microphones here, and if anybody has a question, anything is fair game. If you ask me about my football career, though, you get special points. The older I get, the better I was. Yes.
Good evening. I'm here from California,
Where?
Los Angeles.
All right. My mom is from LA.
All right. We like it. Recently, Newark was a recipient of a rather grand gift from the people of Facebook towards your educational system. Could you please fill us in on how that project is going?
Sure. It was actually from Mark Zuckerberg himself.
Excuse
who
me.
made his money from a small company. I'm not
Facebook, yeah, right, that one.
And so the origins of the gift are very simple. I was trawling on Facebook and saw this guy named Mark, and I friended him, and he said, "How would you like $100 million?" I encourage you all to do it. No, look, Mark is a genius. He's a really amazing American who, at the age of 26, said the biggest crisis to our country, and I believe this, the greatest national security threat to America, clearly, it's like a cancer that's slowly eating away that we're not realizing, is our inability to educate all of our populace at equal and high levels. And the reason why I say that so confidently, in fact, if you guys have a chance, go home tonight and Google McKinsey Disparity Report. The majority of our workforce very soon in America will be minority. About 45% of Americans under the age of 15 are minorities. And the rates of educational achievement are dramatically lower than that. And so what McKinsey concludes in their report is that if we don't heal this problem and lift the educational attainment of all Americans, then we're going to be imposing on ourselves in the future a permanent recession, because we live in a global knowledge-based society. And America, you cannot have a leading democracy if you have a lagging education system, and America is slipping behind dramatically. We used to be number one in the globe for graduating, percentage of our population graduating from college. We're now at number 9 and falling. We used to graduate in fact, the highest demand degrees with STEM degrees, science, technology, engineering, and math, we're falling in our production of engineers compared to other places. We are not preparing this nation to compete in the 21st century. And so Mark, who competes hard for engineers and knows that out in Silicon Valley, a lot of my friends who have companies, Google, Twitter, you name it, know how hard and much in demand, even just a college graduate, forget an advanced degree, the unemployment rate in America in this recession is still only 5%. Don't have a high school degree, 19%. And so he said that I want to find a way to make a difference. And instead of spreading my philanthropy all around, I'm going to choose one place and go like Texas Hold'em, all in one place. And what I want it to become is the place of innovation and ideas, taking the best ideas from all around the country. And so we're just at the beginning. We've only spent about $10 million. It was a matching grant. We've raised about $50 million with a $100 million match. And we're using the money to strategically, Archimedes said, if you give me the right lever, I can change the world. Well, we're looking for those leverage points that are going to make big change. So we've done things like expanding the school day. We've done things about like creating innovation funds for teachers for the best practices to find out what they are, give teachers resources to help us take those best practices and expand them system-wide, and a number of other things. If anybody's interested in how we're spending the money, it's called the Foundation for Newark's Future. You can go to their website and see all the things we're working on. All right, staying to the right.
Hi.
Hi.
You are one of our favorite guests on the Bill Maher Show.
Oh, thank you.
Is that show fun to do?
You know what? Of all the shows that I get a privilege of doing, his is the toughest. He's a Jersey boy, and Jersey boys are tough. And the reason why it's tough is because he's incredibly smart and very, very opinionated and not afraid of coming right at you. And so, for example, he always has me on the show. I'm a Democrat, and he always has me on the show sort of thinking that I will be the guy on the left, and he has some conservative. And the first time I was on the show, he was bashing bankers, as if every banker is evil. And I'm thinking to myself, hello, Muhammad Yunus, Nobel Peace Prize, was a banker and access to capital. So we tend to clash a lot when I'm on the show. But I consider him a friend. He just text messaged me the other day, and I love it. And I get the chance to go out to LA a lot, and I'll be out there later on this month, and I may try to do the show again. But I like people. There's an old saying: you should comfort the disturbed and disturb the comfortable. He is definitely a guy that's disturbing the comfortable. And whether you agree with him or not, he will make you laugh, he'll make you think, and he'll challenge you. And I love that kind of engagement.
Thank you.
Yes, and he's a fellow vegetarian, so that's kind of cool. All right, but he doesn't eat penguin like I do. Yes, sir.
My name is Harold August. I'm a retired educator, not looking to come back to work.
I got $100 million.
No. However, I have a vested interest in the Newark school system. My daughter works for you in one of your schools.
Oh, that's really
She's
tremendous.
A school psychologist. And I think it would be wonderful for her to hear from you, not personally, but to hear you speak. I think you could do a lot for her morale.
I appreciate you saying that. And as a psychologist, she could probably do a lot for my mental health.
Yeah.
So it might be a symbiotic relationship. But thank you.
Or she may be able to help you, Beth August.
Okay. Thank you, sir, very much. Thank you, Harold. Thank you, sir. Yes.
Tilted a little. I'm going to ask, I guess, a little more on a personal side. I'm from Harrington Park and a graduate of NVOT, just like you. Nobody knows our town, but we know you're famous there.
I want to hug you.
So my question is, I've lived in Baltimore now this will be my 9th year living here. And after leaving Harrington Park, kind of always knew I wanted to get back there. And I wonder if you kind of ever see yourself getting back to that small town kind of
Did you marry
area.
a Harrington Parkian?
I didn't. No, but he knows where I'm moving back there.
Okay. So I love New Jersey. I really do, and I feel very blessed that I grew up in our town. It was an amazing experience to me, and I get a chance to go back there all the time. My friends are still my best friend still lives there,
right.
And so I'm up there all the time. And look, I now it's so funny. I went from our town is like 2 square
Very
miles.
Small. Yeah.
And so I grew up in like the smallest town in New Jersey, and now I'm living in the largest city in New Jersey. But what's wonderful for me growing up on sort of 2 different experiences is that I see how beautifully we are sort of interwoven in the same destiny. Mm-hmm. And New Jersey is such a small state; it's easy to pop around. And my dream for my state is that we don't become a state of the biggest disparities. New Jersey is always number 1 or 2 in America for per capita income. But it also always has some of the bottom cities in poverty. That we in New Jersey can show how we can repair America and elevate a state. And New Jersey, and this is the last thing I'll say, is we are from New Jersey, so we know the deep pride in our state. And every state tries to steal our slogans. People don't understand North Carolina, first in flight. The first American flight of any kind was a balloon flight that went from New Jersey to Philadelphia. Empire State, they built all these buildings and became the Empire State. Well, actually, the I-beam was invented in New Jersey. Virginia is for lovers, right? Well, the drive-in movie theater was invented in New Jersey. And there's more love going on in those theaters than anything else. I was conceived in a double feature. Sidney Poitier, Heat of the Night, guess who's coming to dinner? But thank you so much.
Okay,
it's great to see you. Yes.
Hi, how are you? I'm not a big football fan, I have to say, but I am a big political fan. But every day that I watch the news, I see the Democrats against the Republicans, and I feel like I am watching a football game. How do you fix the partisanship that's going on in Washington?
I appreciate the question, and it's something I struggle with. In fact, I was at dinner with some friends, and that was the whole conversation. Because however you identify, most of us in America, and I know this from polling, actually have more in agreement with ourselves, Republican or Democrat, than we do with the wings of our parties that are driving so much of our policy. And in fact, most of us in America, we're very conservative with our wallets, and we're a little more open on social issues in some ways. And so what frustrates me is most problems in America, I feel like there's this manufactured discontent to keep certain people in power. And I often challenge people, give me a controversial issue, and I will show you that we agree more than we disagree. So let's take guns in America, for example. Now, there's some people that say, you can pry my gun out of my cold, dead hands. Then other people are like, oh my gosh, guns are bad, get them away, burn them all, destroy them. And so let me give you an example on both sides of the political aisle. Like one was in Washington, D.C. recently, some of you know this, there was a Heller decision that overturned Washington, D.C.'s gun ban, right? And I remember my friends just railing against the Supreme Court and saying that, oh my gosh, now people in Washington, D.C. can buy guns. There'll be shootings everywhere. And I'm thinking to myself as a mayor of a big city in a state where you can buy guns, there's no ban on handguns in my state, I think that we should be making decisions dispassionately based on data. So I looked at all the shootings in my city, and there's been hundreds and hundreds since I've been mayor, and only one we could find, only one was done with somebody who legally acquired their handgun. And that was a woman that shot her boyfriend, who probably deserved it. In all seriousness, it was actually a very, very tragic case. But so that doesn't work. It's not a real argument. But then I know from the other side of the political aisle is that most Americans agree and disagree with what's happening in our politics. Let me give you what I'm talking about. So Mayor Bloomberg pulled together a coalition of mayors, right, left, and independent, for something called the Mayors Against Illegal Guns. We're not concerned about the guns that people are getting legally. We're concerned about illegal guns. Mayor Bloomberg is amazing. He gave me my best advice ever in politics, and I impart this wisdom to you, any of the young people in this room thinking about going to politics. So I went to the mountain to get the advice from the Bloomberg, and he imparts upon me, he says, Cory, if thee shall decide to go into politics, before thee should go into politics, become a billionaire. It was brilliant. Brilliant advice, and I give it to all of you. I have not followed it myself, but it's brilliant advice. So he paid for a poll of gun owners in America, and using a Republican pollster, a well-known Republican pollster, and found that most Americans who are gun owners, to the point of 80 to 90%, agree with a number of law changes which would constrict the flow of illegal guns into places like Baltimore, Camden, Newark, New Haven, you name it. And those laws are this, and I'm sure that the 90% of us in the room agree that these laws should be changed. So if I make a terroristic threat against my girlfriend and say, I'm going to kill you, people hear that. She files a TRO for me, and I'm now on trial or in court for terroristic threats. I could drive to Virginia tonight, go to a gun show, and buy a gun easily, no questions asked, not even showing identification. In fact, I could be on the terrorist watch list and not be able to fly on planes in America, but I can buy guns. Here's another law that we have that's really dumb in America that most gun owners think we should change. One way that large amounts of guns get on instantly is when people have gun retail shops and the ATF comes down and closes those shops down for not doing background checks. It's called the fire sale loophole. So if I'm going out of business or if I'm getting shut down by the ATF and I'm no longer in business, I have the chance to sell my entire inventory to whoever I want without doing a background check. So this is stuff that's absolutely ridiculous. But the politics of America does not serve to do anything pragmatically about this problem we have. I don't want to get guns out of anybody in here that wants to legally buy a gun, but I want to stop people from dying on my streets because criminals continually so easily get guns. And so there's something wrong with our political system that nobody wants to get less than 100% rating with the NRA because that would be terrible. And we have this what I call absolutist politics on both sides of the political aisle. Democrats have their interest groups that they want 100% rating for as well. And so there's a lot of wonderful experiments going on with democracy right now that we all should be looking into, talking about, and I'll give you just two real quick. So the young lady who said she's from California is experimenting now with something called open primaries. Instead of primaries, what they do now is, and again, I use Washington, D.C. As an example. Adrian Fenty was the mayor of Washington, D.C., right? And did he lose the election in Washington, D.C.? No. He didn't lose an election. He lost a primary. Independents and Republicans did not get a chance to ever say who their mayor was going to be because primary decided it. Do we get a chance in Maryland or New Jersey to even decide who's on the ballot for Republican and Democratic presidential campaigns? No, because those decisions are made in early primary states and the majority of Americans don't have a chance to shape the ticket. So California basically said, forget this. We're having open primaries, Democrats, Republicans, Green, Tea Party, all run in the same primary. The top two vote getters are the one that goes on to the final. So you could have two Republicans. Now, what does that do now that suddenly I'm a politician? And we are rational actors, politicians. We want to preserve our jobs. And now we're in running for the primary. I want to win that primary. Well, now I'm not going to run to the right or to the left. I've got to appeal to as many voters in the middle as I can. And suddenly you're going to see politics start to change. The second thing I hope you all look at is something called America's Elect. America's Elect is this guy named Peter Ackerman, using his moral imagination, asking the same question, how can I fix our politics? And so he basically said, is the way we put presidential candidates on the ballot is wrong, and it's not democratic. So what he decided to do is use the power of social media and the internet to not as a third-party effort, but as an effort to get people on the ballot. And so what he's created is a form that I hope some of you will check out, where, number one, you don't wait for politicians to volunteer. You go on that website and say, you know what, I think General Petraeus, Colin Powell would make a great president. And I need to get a vice president of a different party. In this America's Elect, can't be in the same party. I need to get a vice president of the same party. So I'm going to do a Petraeus or a Colin Powell and Michael Bloomberg. That's going to be my ticket. And now you put that ticket out there, you explain, and it goes through a long process. And eventually there's 6 tickets or 5 tickets, 4, I can't remember exactly what. And now somebody can go to Bloomberg and Petraeus and say, or Powell, and say, wait a minute, you have 12 million Americans through this process that want you to be on the ballot. It's much different than Petraeus thinking, I have to run, I have to whatever. And by the way, you don't have to go through these early primary states. You will be on the ballot. You'll go through this one open primary of all the people in the democracy, and then you will be on the ballot in all 50 states. And so this election, we will have Obama, Biden. I can guess who I think the Republican nominee, it won't be 999. I'm taking bets if anybody wants to take a bet from me. But I think it will be Mitt Romney. But you also are going to have in every state of the nation an America's Elect ticket, not a party, but just a different nominating process. So I'm a big believer that our democracy has never been set in stone. We've been working and changing it all the time. And what we have right now in America is a problem where the system is failing us. And we have the power to change the system. But yet we're caught in the same dumb drama. There's an old African parable about a guy who's walking along, sees a baby in the river, and he jumps in the river, saves the baby. Then he sees another baby in the river, he jumps in the river, saving the baby. Then he sees that, and he's working harder and harder and harder. And that's what I often say, let's organize more. Let's just get our guy, because we believe in America that one man is going to rescue us all from the terrible problems and challenges we have. Sorry, it's never worked that way. And so the African parable goes along because there's another guy who's walking along the river, sees the guy in the water. The guy in the water says, come in this water, help me save the baby. And the guy goes, no. And he keeps walking. He goes, how can you, you selfish, self-interested, evil man, get in this water? And the guy goes, no. And he goes, why? He goes, because I'm going up to the top of the river and figure out why the babies are being put in the first place. We've got to figure out as Americans how to change the fundamental aspects of our democracy, which have been changed regularly throughout the course of 200 years. And what I'm hoping is more Americans wake up and say, everyone who complains about the politicians in office should point a finger at themselves first and say, am I accepting the condition as they are, or am I doing something, taking responsibility for changing it? Our democracy clearly needs to be changed and improved.
Thank you.
What have the major challenges been for you as a mayor in terms of dealing with a governor that is very less fiscal discipline, is very conservative in terms of what he spends? Because the city gets a lot of the money from the state.
Yeah, so I had a meeting with Governor Christie about an hour, 2 hours yesterday. Governor Christie, we're very different people. He's a Republican, I'm a Democrat. He is a meat eater. I like tofu. He is a beer drinker. I like iced tea. So the question is how do you work with somebody? Mm-hmm. And Governor Christie, this is to give him a lot of respect. We knew what was going to happen. We knew that we were two higher profile people within our parties, and this is true, before that we even got going, people would be pitting us together for a 2013 race. In fact, I was at his swearing in, and I'm getting up to leave, and a few cameras got in front of me and saying, is this the first round in the 2013 governor's election? I'm like, the guy just took his oath of office. He's in his first seconds of his administration. You're already thinking about 4 years from now. I got to get back to Newark and stop, work on development projects, this and this and this. So we got into a car when he was governor-elect, and we said, look, let's find a few things that we really agree on, and we're not going to make any movement. I can't change the governor's stance on equal marriage rights. I can't. I categorically disagree with him. As mayor of the city of Newark, I don't marry people because, number one, what is a guy who doesn't even have a girlfriend doing marrying people? And number two is I don't think we should marry people. I should marry people until I can marry everybody. My mom, of course, calls me up and says, will you just marry one person, please? Please, Cory. But I'm never going to change his views on that. So what we said is let's find things we agree on to move the ball forward, and we have. So on educational reform, now I don't agree on everything. I don't agree with some of the fiscal things he's doing around education, but we found a lot of educational views that we agree on. We're making a lot of progress. I think New Jersey did have a huge problem with the cost of public employees. And don't get me wrong, I've got one of my guys here is a police officer. These guys hear shootings and run towards the shootings. And people should be able to do a job like that, retire with dignity and the like. But we've created unsustainable realities when it comes to funds. So he and I stood together and agreed on some of the issues around that. So what I'm finding working with him is sometimes hard, because when he does things I disagree with, I cringe, and I sometimes say things to him in a personal way. But I'm not the person. If you're looking for a Democrat that's going to get up and vilify and demonize somebody and then find no way to work with them, that's just not going to be me. Because every day I walk out of my house, I see immediately people who urgently need help right now. And I found a much better way to help others is through cooperations and coalitions, not through anger and fight. And there'll be time enough, there'll be elections ahead when we can fight. But right now, we as Americans need to stop defining ourselves and our differences and finding our commonalities, work in those spaces. All right? All right. Thank you very much, everybody. Thank you.